Security won't flag you?
Officially, I've been dead for centuries. Any camera that sees me won't find me in a database. And any person who sees me will forget they ever did.
Airlock breached. Unauthorized entry.
Gaal, darling. You are looking well.
Fellow Foundation fans, fellow Mudbeards, and anyone who thinks Dawn gets the coolest escape scenes in Foundation. I wanted to start off by giving major props to whoever made the trailers for the show and not giving any scenes away of Dawn and Gaal working together. And yet that's taken up a lot of scenes throughout the show. If you'll check out my trailer reaction, you'll see my only theory for Dawn was really that he would be evil. But I gotta say, I really like this interpretation Dawn more than any of the others. He's not only tough and capable of being a little malicious, he is someone you can easily root for throughout this season. I think at this point it's safe to say he's not playing some long con game, which was also a major prediction of mine. I also want to pay note to one of my recent Foundation videos. I referenced Thomas LaMarcus being from the show Barry. I was completely wrong about that. That was Anthony Kerrigan. I was mainly going off of what I saw from the trailer, and obviously that was completely incorrect. But seeing more of Magnifico in this episode really solidified that it was a totally different actor. But we'll talk about the crew of entertainers later in the video. For now, we'll talk about how this episode started off, and that was with the continuous shot of Brother Dude heading down into Mycogen. I actually really enjoyed the aesthetic this sector had. Very different from a lot of other scenes we get of Trantor. We see that Brother Dude set this guy up so he could sneak his way off to go find Son. This segues us into Dem realizing that Brother Dude has made his escape, with her coming to the conclusion that the Cleons are split. She pretty much gives up on Brother Dude, seemingly, and heads off to go find Brother Don. And speaking of Don, we then catch back up with him and Gaal, with her cluing Don in to how her powers exactly work. It also shows how easy it is for metallics to sort of abuse their power, even if it's in the best interests of humanity as a whole.
Did you compel me to work with you?
Tried not to, but if I'm honest, sometimes it's hard to tell.
We then cut to Pritchard, who's meeting up with Mayor Ember and again insisting on facing the Mule, despite how much punishment he might get for taking Ember's ship. But Ember, continuing his family's line of stupidity in his mayordom, decided it would be better to lock Pritchard up and focus more on the Empire yet again. That and the traitors that are also a risk for Foundation to deal with. We then cut to Torin and Beta trying to figure out where they should go next, with Magnifico seemingly playing music to calm himself down, which I really enjoy Beta being so nurturing to him. And I also like that Torin was regretful for being rude to him in general. But I would also get tired of hearing music if I was that on edge. But they essentially decide they need to head back to Haven, and I'll touch more on that sequence later in the video. We then cut back to Gaal and Dawn, where she looks into a device and reveals that it's actually Salvor's zygote. And for those that don't know what a zygote is, there you go, but it does leave me to wonder. When she says this is Salvor's zygote, does this mean that this is hers in her combination with Raish that created Salvor? Or was she saying that this was actually Salvor's zygote, in which case that would mean that she was actually pregnant with Hugo's kid? Which I'm not sure how the timelines add up there. It would really depend on how long they were on Ignis. But Salvor did have a wonderful last romantic moment with Hugo before she left. Then she went into cryosleep and met up with Gaal. So however long the events of Season 2 took place, she could have potentially been pregnant and not known it. But with her dying in Season 2 and her body burning in a pyre, I guess if this was the case, it'd have to have been an off-screen moment. But either way, it leads me to wonder, could this potentially lead to another version of Salvor or someone that looks a lot like Salvor, meeting up with Gaal in the future and facing off with the Mule, thus making the vision of her Mule come true? They haven't narratively referenced why the Mule looks any different than he did in her original vision. So, with the recast, you could argue that this is just the same version of the Mule that we saw before, and that the characters have seen with no sort of difference or manipulation. Kinda like a lot of recasts when they're very obviously different looking, but the series continues as if nothing changed. Either way, cutting back to Gaal and Dawn, she continues to push for the enclosure around Calgan, with Dawn officially confirming that enclosures have been outlawed since Cleon the 17th, with the Galactic Council and probably the rest of the Galactic Empire deciding that it's a really dumb idea to take almost every ship you have and surround a planet when you could potentially lose them all. But Dawn, being the G that he is, lets everyone know that the odds of lightning striking twice are very low. They decide that how they're going to go about this is to incriminate some of the Galactic Council. And unfortunately, Don only knows so much about the Galactic Council members he's close with, those he would call his friends, like Councilman Tarisk, which you gotta feel a little bad for the guy, because putting an enclosure around Calgon would mean locking his family in with a galactic pirate. If only he knew how much worse it could actually be. But I want to pull a side note, Cassian is absolutely killing it this season as Brother Don. We then cut back to Haven and we find out that Randu Mallow has actually survived. Him reuniting with Torin and Beta helps clue us into a little more about who these characters really are. All we've seen of them so far is their influencer lifestyle, but this was a way to sort of pull back the veil. And I will say, the dialogue in this scene was very clever. I thought it was very witty how they were communicating with each other back and forth. I also thought some of the writing throughout the whole episode was very clever, except for one specific moment, but I'll get into that later. Either way, it turns out that Torin Mallow lost his parents and Randu lost his son in the same accident. With them coming together and the show alluding to them having some resentment for each other, eventually they both went off to live different lifestyles, with Randu Mallow getting tired of the line of mayors that keep ruling Foundation, and Torin not really wanting a part of any of it, choosing to embrace life and chase how he wants to live and the way he can live. I do want to pay special note to something Beta says about where she came from though, describing her origins as coming from a world that was jumped past, and referring to herself as a climber. I know I'm not quite sure if this means she comes from one of the barbarian worlds, or from any of the worlds that were just too far for any of the jump ships to travel, but I do think that her bonding with Randu was a pretty sweet moment. But I do also have my theories about this segment as well, I'll touch on later in the video. We then cut back to Dale and Gon enacting their plan and successfully enclosing Calgon. But we come to find out that this has actually failed. For the Mule was already one step ahead. He reveals that he brought his own world-destroying weapon to the table.
But I left you a welcome gift. A cobalt spike. Cobalt. Blue death. All that harnessed energy. Building and building and building until it burst.
This leads to Calgon being destroyed, Councilman Tarisk regretting his decisions getting involved with Empire, and Don having to make an escape so not only the Mule can't cause any potential damage, but so the Imperial Guard can't get him, for they will audit his memory, and they'll eventually find out about some of his interactions with Gaal. As he's trying to make his escape, some very cool shots by the way, we see that Gaal reveals that she kind of had a clue that the Mule would make a move like this. Turns out this was sort of her intention, wanting the Empire to continue to fall. Why did she put Don through all this, despite the fact that she does want him safe and want to protect all of humanity?
To beat the Mule, I had to make the galaxy fit Seldon's initial conditions. Foundation had to be the largest galactic power.
Why does Empire need to suffer for you to do that?
Empire was never going to defeat the Mule, and now that you have lost your armada, the Council will seize full power over the Imperium, and the Cleonic Age will end. You will take Empire. When he has Trantor Foundation can lay siege to him, they can grab every contested planet in the Middle Band, control the resources, starve him, kill him. That's the enclosure I need to succeed, not this one.
Why would she let so many people die? Well, essentially, it's to stop the Mule, and to continue the work of the Seldon plan. Gaal is an avid believer in Seldon's plan, and since Season 2 has had full faith. It's also fair to say that she wasn't directly involved in the outcomes of this decision. The Mule had already made his plans and taken over the jump gate before the Council even made their decision. And while yes, you can say Gaal should have maybe brought up the fact that the Mule could do what he actually ended up doing, as she had a hunch, I think the primary reason she made this decision was fear. All she's known for her entire life has been fear. From being born to a dying world, to the entire journey we see of Foundation, to the continuous haunting visions of the Mule, and the notion that all her visions of the future stop at her encounter with the Mule. While there is maybe some wiggle room to work together with Empire, considering Brother Dude is a pretty docile guy, Brother Don is down to work with them, and Brother Dusk seems to have the temperament of, well, a normal Brother Dusk, but considering his relationship with Quint, I think this Empire was the most susceptible to a team-up with the Foundation. And there is an argument to be made about how much better they'd fare against the Mule together as a team. But Gaal truly does believe that the Selden plan is the way to go and Empire is just a problem to be dealt with. Considering the era that she was actually born into, I could see why she wouldn't necessarily trust Empire. But I know Gaal is trying to save Dawn. I still think she shouldn't have said any of this. But I'll reveal why a little bit later in the video. Eventually this segues us into Councilman Terrace confronting Dawn, before Councilman Terrace decides to blow himself out of the window. And Dawn thought that looked a little fun, so he decides to join him. With Gaal obviously feeling a little regret over her decisions, and I don't think fully comprehending how implicit she was in the events that took place on Calgon. This does kind of seem like something a lot of generals or people who make these big decisions in war have to do. Whether this was the right decision or not, honestly up for debate, but I will always take a unification over making some suffer so some can live. Especially if the some suffering is Brother Dude and that ferret. We then get the shot I've been waiting for this entire episode, and that was Demerzel boarding the ship and confronting Gaal. See, as soon as Gaal was shown wearing the overalls, I knew that this would be the episode that they would eventually confront each other. And while I wish it wasn't in the final moments, I do think that that shot of Demerzel showing up was pretty cool. Now, what does this mean for next week's episode? Well, I'll go ahead and get into that, but first, potential spoiler warnings. If you want to step away now and just enjoy the series as a whole, go for it. But we'll start out with stating the obvious. Calgon definitely shouldn't have gone this direction, according to the books. And while some of the plot elements involving Calgon aren't essential to what goes down in the series as a whole, or at least can be filled by other parties at play, like Empire if it's still around, it is sad to see because Calgon was one of the coolest looking planets in my opinion. R.I.P. Calgon. But let's cut back to some of my comments earlier about Torrin and Beta's scene with Magnifico. Again, another reminder about spoilers, but if the show continues to follow the route of Magnifico being the Mule, you have to wonder if his scenes playing music. We have confirmation from Beta that they've pieced together Magnifico's music does actually affect people in different ways, and tap into the mind to amplify the same powers the Mule has. This does make me question if this could actually end up being the Mule, or if they're straight up telling us how his relationship to the Mule works. But I have another theory on who the true Mule could be, and that's coming in a future Mule video. See, he's playing music before, and Torrin yells at him. It's after Magnifico plays music here that they all decide to head to Haven. We then later get a scene where Magnifico literally plays music to help Beta in her influencing of Randu Malo, which she does become successful in. So with these two moments, and with seemingly the result being all of them heading to Foundation, you have to wonder if he happened to just be playing music just because, or if this is all part of his plan and he's trying to keep things going. Still, it does make me wonder why they would have to go to Haven first. But I think next week is going to be a very interesting episode because this seems like the moment we'll finally get Demerzel versus Gaal. And I'll say one thing, Demerzel, whether it was ever true or whether it's all been due to her programming, loves the Cleons. Ever since the first. And what Gaal just did essentially doomed the love of her current life. In my very tired eyes, I think they'll meet up next week to discuss the Mule. And somehow either Dem will piece together or Gaal will let it slip some of the actions she took to hurt the Empire. And with this episode happening so early in the season, I do actually think that both of them will make it out of this situation coming to some form of conclusion, or an agreement of some kind. And then there's two ways this could go next week. Either both Gaal and Demerzel happen to come across Dawn while he's floating out in space and save him, or the more likely answer is that the Mule will take Dawn. See, according to the trailer shots, you can already see that the Mule and Dawn at some point meet. And what's he gonna do? Well, I think he's gonna tap into Dawn's mind and make him do some things in the Empire to help promote his plans. But I also think he's gonna figure out Gale's entire plan. See, she's hoping the Mule will take his resources and go over to Trantor, and then, being at the center of the galaxy, becoming an easier target to enclose. But, as we've seen in some of the trailers for the show, the Mule's next stop is likely New Terminus. See, in my eyes, the only direction we can go now is the Mule landing on New Terminus, taking over, it probably being a massacre, and honestly likely could maintain hold over New Terminus and Foundation through the rest of the season. And essentially Gaal and her ragtag group of heroes she comes across will work together to break into Foundation and hopefully stop the Mule. But odds are this won't go well and we might actually end up losing some characters. But a key thing to note, in the trailer we see a moment of Gaal jumping out of a window and flying through the sky after a falling, damaged beggar. While watching this originally, my first impression was that Harry Selden could be on the beggar and she was hoping to save him. But now I wonder if potentially Salvor's zygote is on the beggar and she's not willing to let it go. My only real complaint, if I had to give any, was the scene where the mule actually revealed his big plan. While I think Pilu's acting is absolutely fine, I have no problem with it, the dialogue used in this sequence was very weird and very questionable. If you had repeated this dialogue with any sort of dialect, maybe a wimpier kind, or had an actor of any less of a solid caliber, the scene I don't think would have gone as well. But that's just my opinion, maybe I'm completely wrong, let me know what you guys think. If you're one of the fans who didn't necessarily enjoy any storyline outside of the Empires before, how do you feel about the current storylines taking place? The band of entertainers, the kids of Foundation, Dawn and Gaal making their moves and killing millions, or Brother Dude going after his girl. There's also the Forever Empress, who, if you really think about it, is the anchor for all of the storylines taking place. Either way, we're already halfway through Foundation Season 3, and it looks like this will be the last season this team has been currently working on, with a new team coming in for the next season. Who knows how that will go, but I am very interested to see how Goyer and his team will leave things within Season 3 of the series. And while I am very sad that they're leaving and wish they would stay, if they take Demrizel with them, I'm gonna be very upset. But I also kinda get it. And today, we're gonna talk about Foundation Season 6 episode... I've said Mule too many times. Anyways, it's after the Mule Still, it does make me wonder why they would have to go to Zygo. Still, when they meet up next week, she'll meet them. Oh my god.